They say you cannot choose your family, but nobody tells you that you can evict them. I thought my mother was just biased until she walked past my newborn's crib with dead eyes to hand $500 toys to my sister's children. When she called them her real family, she forgot one crucial detail. She was just a guest in my house, and her lease had just expired. My name is Jocelyn Renford, and on that particular December afternoon, standing upright felt like a physical negotiation I was losing. It had been exactly 14 days since I had undergone emergency surgery to bring my daughter, Ilara, into the world, and my body still felt like a map of tender, stitched together territories. Every movement was a reminder of the incision across my lower abdomen, a sharp, hot pull that warned me to sit down. But I did not sit down. I was the hostess. I was the daughter who had spent 30 years trying to buy affection with perfection, and today was supposed to be the day I finally succeeded. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of our living room in Connecticut. Outside, the lake was a sheet of steel-gray ice, reflecting the somber sky of a New England winter. Inside, however, I had curated a masterpiece of warmth. The 12-foot Douglas fir was draped in garlands of dried oranges and cinnamon sticks. The fireplace crackled with birch logs. I had ordered specifically for their scent, and the air smelled of roasted rosemary and clove. I had done all of this, hired the caterers, decorated the mantel, ignored my doctor's orders to rest, because my mother, Beatrice, had agreed to come for an early Christmas. It was the first time she would meet her granddaughter. My husband, Liam, walked up behind me and placed a gentle hand on the small of my back. He felt the tension radiating off me like heat. "You should be sitting," he whispered, his voice low and grounding. "Ilara is asleep. The caterers have everything under control. You look pale. Joss." "I am fine," I lied, adjusting the hem of my velvet dress to ensure it hid the postpartum swelling I was so self-conscious about. "It has to be perfect. Liam, you know how she is. If the napkins are folded wrong, she will think I am falling apart." Liam tightened his jaw but said nothing. He knew the history. He knew that for 3 decades, I had been the invisible child, the one who kept the books and paid the bills, while my sister Tiffany was the golden sun around which my mother orbited. But I foolishly believed that a baby changed things. I believed that the arrival of a new generation washed away the sins of the old one. I was wrong. The sound of tires crunching on gravel announced their arrival. A moment later, the heavy oak front doors burst open without a knock. My sister, Tiffany, swept in like a hurricane, bringing a gust of freezing air and chaotic energy with her. She was followed closely by her 2 sons, aged 8 and 10, who immediately began sprinting through the foyer with their snowy boots on, shrieking as if they were in a playground rather than a private residence. "Tiffany!" I called out, trying to muster a welcoming smile despite the mud being tracked onto the Persian rug. "Hello, come in. Get warm." Tiffany did not look at me. She was busy unwinding a massive cashmere scarf from her neck, her eyes scanning the high ceilings of my home with a look that was half appreciation, half calculation. "God, it is a trek to get out here," she complained, tossing her coat onto the antique bench rather than hanging it up. "My GPS lost signal twice. I thought we were going to end up in Canada." She walked right past me. She did not ask how I was feeling. She did not ask about the traumatic delivery she knew I had endured. She did not even glance toward the bassinet in the corner of the room where Ilara was sleeping. Then, my mother entered. Beatrice walked with the slow, deliberate gait of a woman who expected the world to wait for her. She was wearing a new fur coat, one I suspected I had indirectly paid for given the emergency loan I had wired her 2 months ago, and her hair was coiffed into a stiff, immobile helmet of blonde perfection. "Mother," I said, stepping forward, ignoring the burning pain in my abdomen. "Merry Christmas," she offered me her cheek, cold and powdery, but her eyes were already drifting past me to the buffet table set up in the dining room. The drive was exhausting. "Jocelyn, I hope you have something stronger than eggnog. My nerves are shot. I missed you too, I said to the empty air as she breezed past. I took a deep breath and looked at Liam. He was standing guard by the bassinet, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the crib. I walked over to him, signaling with my eyes that he should stay calm. I wanted this to work. I needed this to work. "Mother, come see her," I said, my voice trembling slightly with pride. I gestured to the bassinet. "Come meet Alara." Beatrice paused. She held a crystal glass of wine she had already poured for herself. She walked over slowly, peering over the edge of the bassinet with the same level of enthusiasm one might show when inspecting a clearance rack at a grocery store. Alara was awake. She was tiny, wrapped in a white knit blanket, her large dark eyes blinking up at the unfamiliar face. My heart swelled. This was the moment. This was when the ice would melt. "She is very small," Beatrice said flatly. "She is perfect," I corrected gently. "Do you want to hold her? I can pick her up for you." I reached down to lift my daughter, wincing as the movement engaged my core muscles. But Beatrice took a sharp step back, holding up a manicured hand like a traffic cop. "Oh, absolutely not," she said, her voice sharp. I froze, my hands hovering over my baby. "What?" "Look at what I am wearing, Jocelyn," Beatrice said, gesturing to her blouse. It was a shimmering, champagne-colored fabric that caught the light. "This is 100% imported silk. I am not risking projectile vomit or drool on a dry-clean-only garment. Besides, babies make me nervous. They are so sticky." The rejection hit me harder than a slap. It was not just the refusal. It was the look of mild disgust on her face. She looked at my daughter, her own flesh and blood, as if she were a biological hazard. "She is your granddaughter," Liam said, his voice dangerously low. "And I am looking at her, am I not?" Beatrice snapped, taking a sip of her wine. "She looks fine. Sleeping. Good. Now, where are the boys? I have presents." The mood shift was instantaneous. Beatrice turned away from the crib without a second glance, her face lighting up with a genuine, beaming joy that I had never seen directed at me. "Boys," she shouted, her voice trilling with excitement, "come see what Grandma B has for you." Tiffany's sons came thundering back into the room, nearly knocking over a vase on the side table. They did not apologize. They just swarmed around Beatrice as she began to pull boxes out of the massive designer shopping bags she had brought in. I stood by the bassinet, one hand on Alara's chest to soothe her, and watched in stunned silence. Beatrice produced the first box. It was a high-end gaming console, the latest model that was sold out in most stores. The price tag, which she had carelessly left on the side, read $550. "For my big boy," she cooed, handing it to the 10-year-old. He tore the paper off, screamed "yes," and immediately ran to find a television, not even saying thank you. Next, she pulled out a pair of limited edition sneakers for the 8-year-old. I recognized the brand immediately. They were resale market exclusives. $400, easily, maybe $500. "And for you, my handsome prince," she said, kissing the top of his head. Then came the designer jackets, then the smartwatches. My head began to swim. The room felt suddenly hot and suffocating. I did the math in my head. There was easily $2,000 worth of merchandise being torn open on my living room rug. $2,000. A cold realization trickled down my spine. Last week, my mother called me in tears. She had told me her insurance had lapsed, and she needed urgent medication and supplements for her heart condition. She had asked to borrow my credit card, just for the pharmacy. I had given it to her. Of course, I had authorized the card for health expenses. I walked over to the pile of discarded wrapping paper. I saw a receipt fluttering on the floor. Having fallen out of one of the bags, I picked it up. The date was 3 days ago. The last 4 digits of the card used matched my own. The total was $2,340.50. My hands began to shake. It was not the money. I had money. It was the lie. It was the fact that she had feigned illness to steal from me. only to use that stolen money to buy affection from my sister's children right in front of my face. "Mother," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and distant. Beatrice was beaming, watching the 8-year-old try on his new sneakers. "What is it, Jocelyn? Look how well they fit him. He has such aristocratic feet, just like your father." "You used my card," I said, holding up the receipt. "You told me you needed heart medication." Beatrice waved her hand dismissively, not even looking at me. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. I did buy some vitamins. But I was at the mall, and I saw these, and I knew the boys would just die for them. You have plenty of money. Jocelyn, do not be stingy. It is Christmas." "I am not being stingy," I said, my voice rising. "You lied to me, and you spent over $2,000 on toys." "They are investments in their happiness," she countered, her tone hardening. I looked around the room. The floor was littered with expensive gifts. Tiffany was on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, completely unbothered by the fact that her children were ignoring the host. "And what about Alara?" I asked. The question hung in the air, fragile and sharp. Beatrice paused. She looked at me, then glanced at the bassinet in the corner as if she had forgotten it was there. "What about her?" "Did you bring anything for her?" I asked. "It is her first Christmas. You spent $2,000 on Tiffany's kids using my money. Did you get anything for your other grandchild?" Beatrice let out a short, incredulous laugh. She took another sip of wine, her eyes cold and unyielding. "Jocelyn, really, she is 2 weeks old. She is a blob. She does not know what day it is, let alone what a present is. Why would I waste money on something she cannot even appreciate?" "Because she is family," I whispered. Tears were pricking the back of my eyes, hot and humiliating. "Because you are her grandmother," Beatrice sighed, the kind of long, suffering sigh one might use when explaining simple addition to a toddler. She stepped closer to me, lowering her voice so only I, and Liam, who had moved to stand directly behind me, could hear. "Look," she said, gesturing vaguely toward Tiffany and the 2 boys who were currently fighting over a controller. "Tiffany is having a hard time. She is a single mother. She needs the help. Those boys need strong male figures and nice things to feel normal." "And what am I?" I asked. "What is Alara?" Beatrice looked me up and down. Her gaze lingered on my comfortable, nursing-friendly velvet dress, then flicked to the expensive furniture of the house she was standing in. "You are fine, Jocelyn. You always land on your feet. You have this big, empty house. You have your husband." She said the word husband with a subtle sneer. "But let us be honest," she smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. It was a smile of pity mixed with cruelty. "Alara is just a baby. She is not a person yet. But those boys? Tiffany? They need me. They appreciate me." She leaned in, her perfume cloying and overpowering. "They are my real family. Jocelyn, you know that. We just have a different connection. They are real family. You have always been independent." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "They are my real family." The words echoed in my skull, bouncing off the walls of the home I paid for, reverberating through the air I conditioned. It was not just an insult. It was a clarification. It was the final piece of a puzzle I had been trying to solve since I was 5 years old. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It wasn't that I hadn't tried hard enough. It was that to her, I simply did not count. My daughter did not count. I felt a physical blow in my chest, an ache that had nothing to do with my surgery. I looked at the woman who gave birth to me, and for the first time, I did not see a mother. I saw a stranger who was drinking my wine, spending my money, and breaking my heart with the casual efficiency of a butcher. Beside me, Liam tensed. I could feel the rage vibrating through his frame. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. He took a step forward, his mouth opening to deliver an eviction notice that would have ended the evening right then and there. "Get out," Liam started to say. his voice a low growl. "I want you." I reached out and grabbed his forearm. My grip was iron tight. I looked up at him. My eyes were dry now. The tears had evaporated, replaced by something cold and hard, something I had inherited from my father, Arthur. "No," I whispered to Liam. "Not yet." I turned to my mother. She was already turning away, dismissing the conversation as finished, ready to go dote on the boys. "Dinner is served," Liam announced, his voice sounding like cracking ice. "Everyone to the dining room, now." He did not frame it as a request. It was an order. Beatrice blinked, surprised by his tone, but shrugged. "Well, good. I am starving. Tiffany, boys, come on. Auntie Jocelyn made food." As they filed into the dining room, leaving me standing alone next to the bassinet, I looked down at my sleeping daughter. She was so innocent, so unaware that she had just been discarded by the woman who should have cherished her. I reached down and stroked her soft cheek. "Real family," I whispered to the empty room. The pain in my abdomen flared again, but this time, I welcomed it. It was sharp. It was real. It was focusing. My mother had made a mistake. She thought she was the queen holding court in her daughter's home. She thought she could take and never pay the price. She had forgotten whose name was on the deed. She had forgotten whose signature was on the checks. And she had certainly forgotten that while I might have been the quiet child, I was also the one who listened when my father taught us about consequences. I smoothed my dress. I wiped the invisible tear from my cheek. And then I followed them into the dining room. I was not just a hostess anymore. I was a landlord preparing for an eviction. The dinner was a cacophony of silver scraping against fine china and the performative laughter of people who believed the world existed solely to be their audience. I sat at the head of the table, pushing a roasted potato around my plate, while my mind drifted backward, away from the suffocating scent of Tiffany's overbearing perfume and into the quiet, dusty archives of my memory, to understand why my mother felt comfortable disowning her newborn granddaughter while sitting in a house she did not own. One has to understand the architecture of my childhood. I was never the protagonist of Beatrice's life. That role belonged exclusively to Tiffany. From the moment Tiffany could walk, she was a mirror image of our mother, blonde, vivacious, and utterly incapable of delayed gratification. They were two sides of the same golden coin, spinning through life on a current of charm and superficiality. I, on the other hand, was the shadow. I took after my father, Arthur. I was dark-haired, serious, and possessed a quiet intensity that made my mother nervous. In the family dynamic, Tiffany was the golden child, the one destined for greatness simply by existing. I was the scapegoat, or perhaps more accurately, the utility player, the one kept around to fix things, to remember birthdays, and to absorb the blame when the world failed to bend to their whims. My father saw this. Arthur Renford was a man of few words, but immense impact. He was a commercial real estate titan who had built his empire not by shouting in boardrooms, but by reading the fine print that everyone else ignored. He was a shark in a beige suit. While my mother spent her days dragging Tiffany to modeling auditions and buying clothes they did not need to impress people they did not like, my father took me to work. I remember being 12 years old, sitting in the corner of his mahogany-paneled study on Sunday afternoons, while Tiffany was downstairs learning how to manipulate a camera lens. I was upstairs learning how to manipulate a balance sheet. My father would slide a ledger across the desk toward me, the smell of old paper and cedar filling the air. "Look at this. Jocelyn," he would say, his voice a low rumble. "Tell me where the leak is." He treated me like an adult, long before I was one. He taught me the difference between an asset and a liability, a lesson my mother never learned. He taught me that money was not magic. It was math. It was cold, hard logic, and most importantly, he taught me that ownership was the only true power in this world. "Beatrice thinks money is water," he told me once, looking out the window as my mother argued with a gardener over the color of the hydrangeas. "She thinks it flows forever. She does not understand that you have to build the reservoir first. My father died 3 years ago. It was pancreatic cancer, swift and brutal. In his final months, as his body withered, his mind became terrifyingly sharp. He knew exactly what would happen the moment he was gone. He knew Beatrice would burn through his fortune within a decade, dragging Tiffany along for the joyride, and they would leave me to clean up the ashes. So, he built a fortress. Arthur Renford did not leave his estate to his wife. He did not leave it to his children equally. He created a master trust, a legal entity so complex and fortified that it gave our family lawyer, Mr. Harrison, a migraine just drafting it. The terms were specific, ironclad, and secret, everything. The portfolio of commercial buildings in downtown Hartford, the investment accounts, the antique car collection, and yes, this sprawling lakeside mansion in Connecticut was placed into the trust, and the sole trustee, the person with absolute discretion over every single penny and every single brick, was me. My mother and Tiffany did not understand this. When the will was read, they heard what they wanted to hear. They heard allowance and right of residency. They assumed that because I was handling the paperwork, I was merely the administrator, the glorified secretary carrying out my father's wish to spoil them. They believed the money belonged to the family, a nebulous concept that really meant it belonged to Beatrice. They did not know that the deed to the house was held by an LLC that I managed. They did not know that my mother's right to reside in this house was a life estate provision, contingent upon a specific clause regarding conduct detrimental to the trustee, in plain English. My father had given me the power to evict my own mother if she became unbearable. For 3 years, I had kept this sword sheathed. I loved my mother. Despite her flaws, I wanted to keep the peace. I paid the credit card bills she racked up. I covered Tiffany's rent when her third acting career failed. I let them play the role of the wealthy matriarch and the heiress, while I stayed in the background, quietly approving the wire transfers. I allowed them to treat me like a servant in my own kingdom because I thought that was the price of having a family. This dynamic was exacerbated by my own success. While Tiffany was currently between opportunities, a euphemism for unemployed and delusional, I was the senior director of operations at Helix Gen, a biotech firm leading the market in gene therapy research. I worked 60-hour weeks. I managed budgets that dwarfed my father's estate. I had built a career on my own merit, without using the Renford name to open a single door. My mother hated it. She hated that I woke up at 5 in the morning to run. She hated that I wore tailored blazers instead of flowing silk. But most of all, she hated my independence because it highlighted her own uselessness. She viewed my career not as an achievement, but as an insult to her lifestyle. In her mind, a lady should not work. A lady should be kept. This resentment bled into her view of my marriage. Liam was not one of us, according to Beatrice. He was an architect, talented, hardworking, and kind, but he came from a family of teachers in Ohio. He did not have a summer home in the Hamptons. He did not know which fork to use for escargot, nor did he care. To Beatrice, my marriage to Liam was the final betrayal. She claimed I was diluting the bloodline, a ridiculous statement considering our bloodline was 2 generations of real estate speculation, not royalty. She treated Liam like hired help. She ignored him at dinners. She made snide comments about his flannel shirts and his calloused hands. She did not understand that those hands had built the nursery she had just walked past without a glance. And now, we were here. I looked across the table at Tiffany. She was currently dissecting a lobster tail, her fingers dripping with butter, talking loudly about a business opportunity involving importing dietary tea from South America. It was clearly a pyramid scheme. My mother was nodding enthusiastically, her eyes bright with the reflection of the chandelier. "It sounds marvelous, darling," Beatrice said, taking a long drink of her Chardonnay. "You have such a head for business, just like your father." The irony was so thick it nearly choked me. Tiffany had never balanced a checkbook in her life, She was 32 years old and still on my family phone plan. Yet, in my mother's rewritten history, Tiffany was the prodigy. "I just need a little startup capital," Tiffany said, glancing at me with a look that was less of a request and more of a demand. "Like, maybe 50,000, just to get the inventory." "We can discuss it later," Beatrice said, waving her hand. "Your sister will handle the details. That is what she is good at, details." She said the word details like it was a dirty word, something beneath her dignity. I set my fork down. The metal made a sharp click against the porcelain. "Helix Gen is launching a new trial next month," I said quietly, trying to steer the conversation toward reality. "I will be traveling to Boston quite a bit." "Boring," Tiffany sang out, popping a piece of lobster into her mouth. "Science is so dry. Joss, nobody wants to hear about test tubes." "It is saving lives, Tiffany," Liam said, his voice tight. "Oh, hush, Liam," Beatrice snapped. "Let the girls talk. Nobody is saving lives here. We are eating dinner, Jocelyn. About this tea business, I think it is a wonderful idea for Tiffany to finally have something of her own. You should write her a check tomorrow." It was not a question. It was a command. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had earlier that evening looked at my 2-week-old daughter and called her a blob. I looked at the woman who had just spent nearly $2,500 of my money on toys for her real family, while claiming poverty to me. She truly believed she was safe. She believed the money was an endless river and I was just the dam keeper, obligated to open the floodgates whenever she was thirsty. She had mistaken my silence for submission. She had mistaken my patience for weakness. My father's voice echoed in my head, clear as a bell. Ownership is the only true power. They were sitting on my chairs. They were eating my food. They were drinking wine from my cellar. And yet, they looked at me with total contempt. The comment about the real family was not just a slip of the tongue. It was a declaration of war. It was the moment the veil lifted. For 30 years, I had been paying for their love, and tonight, I had received the receipt. Value 0. If I was not their real family, then I had no familial obligation to support them. If I was not their real family, then the social contract was broken. And if the social contract was broken, we were left with only one thing, the legal contract. I took a sip of water. It was cool and crisp. "We can talk about finances later," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the storm raging behind my ribs. "Tonight is a celebration, after all." "Exactly," Beatrice raised her glass. "To family, and to Tiffany's new venture." "To family," I repeated, but I did not raise my glass. I watched them toast to a future that did not exist. They were celebrating a victory they had not earned, funded by a bank account they did not control. They were ghosts haunting a house they believed they owned. My father had prepared me for this. He had not just left me money, he had left me a weapon. He had wrapped his legacy in layers of trusts, LLCs, and conditional clauses, anticipating the exact greed I was witnessing tonight. He had known that one day Beatrice would push too far. He had known that one day I would need to choose between being a good daughter and being a strong woman. As I watched Tiffany wipe butter from her chin with one of my linen napkins, I realized the choice had already been made for me. The little girl who wanted her mother's approval was gone. She had died the moment Beatrice walked past Alara's crib. In her place sat the trustee, and the trustee was about to conduct an audit. It was exactly 72 hours after the disastrous Christmas party, when the digital tether of my patience finally snapped. I was in my home office, balancing Alara on one arm while trying to review a clinical trial protocol for Helix Gen on my monitor. The house was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the weekend. But that silence was shattered by the aggressive vibration of my phone against the desk. It was not a text message or a call. It was a high-priority notification from my private banking app. The subject line read, "Unusual activity detected." I swiped the screen open, my heart rate spiking instinctively. I assumed it was a cloning scam or perhaps a duplicate charge, but when I logged in, The transaction staring back at me was not a glitch. It was a purchase made 2 hours ago on the supplementary American Express Platinum card I had entrusted to my mother for emergencies. The merchant was Alpine Luxury Escapes. The amount was $15,000. I stared at the number. $15,000. I refreshed the page, hoping it was a mistake. It was not. The transaction was pending but approved. My mother, who had claimed poverty just days ago to borrow money for heart medication, had just dropped the equivalent of a small sedan on a travel agency. I placed Alara gently into her swing and dialed Beatrice's number. My hand was trembling, not with fear, but with a cold, rising fury. She answered on the second ring, her voice light and airy. "Hello, darling. I was just about to call you. Did you see the link Tiffany sent for those organic teas? We really need to get that order in today to qualify for the—" "Mother," I cut her off. "Why is there a charge for $15,000 on my card?" There was a pause on the other end, a beat of silence that was not born of guilt, but of calculation. "Oh, that?" she said, her tone dismissing the sum as if it were pocket change. "Do not worry. I was going to tell you. I booked a little getaway for New Year's, just a week in Aspen. The boys have never seen real snow. You know, mountain snow. And Tiffany has been so stressed lately. I thought it would be a wonderful bonding experience for the family." $15,000? I repeated, enunciating every syllable. "You spent $15,000 on a vacation without asking me? You told me you were broke. You told me you needed money for medicine." "I am broke," she insisted, her voice taking on that familiar defensive whine. "That is why I use the card." "Jocelyn, honestly, why do you have to be so bean-counting about everything? I am an old woman. I do not know how many Christmases I have left. I just want to see my grandchildren happy. Is that a crime? Do you want your mother to die with regrets because you were too busy hoarding your father's money?" The gaslighting was masterful. Within 10 seconds, she had pivoted from theft to mortality. She was trying to make me feel like a miser for questioning a 5-figure unauthorized expense. "This is not about you dying, Mother. This is about theft. That card is for emergencies. Aspen is not an emergency. A 5-star ski resort is not a pharmacy. It is for the family," she snapped. "Tiffany needs this. Her mental health is fragile. If you actually cared about anyone other than yourself and that job of yours, you would understand." Before I could respond, there was a scuffling sound on the line, and Tiffany's voice pierced my ear. She must have been listening on speakerphone. "God, you are such a buzzkill." "Joss," Tiffany spat. "We are talking about a week in the mountains. You earn more than that in a month. Why are you so selfish? You sit in that giant house with your husband and your baby, and you begrudge us a little happiness? It is pathetic. It is not your money." "Tiffany," I said, my voice dropping an octave, "it is not Mom's money. It is mine, and I am canceling the trip." "You would not dare," Tiffany hissed. "I already told the boys. They are packing. If you cancel this, you are ruining their childhood. And for what? So you can put more money in Alara's college fund? She is 2 weeks old. She does not need money. She needs diapers. She does not know the difference between a dollar and a leaf. My kids are actual people with actual needs." There it was again, the hierarchy. My daughter was a prop. Her children were people. "I am canceling the transaction," I said firmly. "And I am canceling the card. If you do that," my mother's voice returned, harder this time, stripping away the frail old lady act, "then do not bother coming to Sunday dinner. I will not have you upsetting the boys with your stinginess." I hung up. I did not slam the phone down. I simply pressed the red button. My chest was heaving. I immediately called the bank and reported the transaction as unauthorized. The fraud department agent was sympathetic but efficient. The card was dead within minutes, but the day was far from over. An hour later, my phone pinged with a message from an old college friend, Sarah, who lived in Oak Haven but ran in the same social circles as Tiffany. It was a screenshot of a Facebook post Tiffany had made 20 minutes ago. The post was a photo of my father's study, the sacred space where he had taught me everything I knew. The caption read, "So excited for the renovations. Finally turning this dusty old office into a state-of-the-art gaming room for my little kings. Out with the boring mahogany. In with the neon. Blessed New Chapter Renford. Estate." I stared at the image. The photo had been taken during the Christmas party. While I was in the kitchen trying to coordinate dinner, Tiffany had snuck into my father's office, a room I kept locked, or so I thought, and photographed it as if it were hers to demolish. Beneath the caption, in the comments, someone had asked, "Wow, did you buy the place?" Tiffany's reply, "It's the family estate. Darling, Mom and I are finally updating it. It's practically mine anyway since I'm the one who actually uses it for family events." The rage that filled me then was different from the anger about the money. The money was just numbers. This was desecration. That study was the only place where I felt my father's presence. The idea of Tiffany tearing out his bookshelves to install gaming monitors was a physical violation. I was about to grab my keys and drive over to the guest cottage where they were staying, but my phone rang again. It was Beatrice. I answered, expecting an apology. I should have known better. "Jocelyn," she said, her voice brisk and businesslike, "I'm glad I caught you. We need to resolve this financial misunderstanding because a new opportunity has come up, and time is of the essence." I was so stunned by her audacity that I could not speak. "Tiffany has found a supplier for her tea business," Beatrice continued, barreling over my silence. "But the buy-in fee has increased. It is a premier tier now. We need $50,000 by close of business today to secure her position as a regional distributor. I need you to wire it from the emergency trust fund." $50,000, I repeated. "You want $50,000 for a pyramid scheme? After I just canceled a $15,000 unauthorized vacation?" "It is not a pyramid scheme. It is network marketing," Beatrice shouted. "And it is her future. This is how she becomes independent. Jocelyn, you are always complaining that she borrows money. Well, help her start this business and she will never ask you for a dime again. It is an investment." "The answer is no," I said. "No to the Aspen trip, no to the $50,000, and no to Tiffany touching a single inch of Dad's study." "Excuse me?" Beatrice's voice went dangerously quiet. "What did you say about the study?" "I saw the post. Mother, the house belongs to the LLC. I am the manager of the LLC. Tiffany has no right to renovate anything. If she touches one panel of wood in that room, I will have her arrested for vandalism." The silence on the line stretched for a long time. When Beatrice spoke again, her voice was unrecognizable. It was low, venomous, and completely devoid of warmth. "Listen to me very carefully. Jocelyn, you are sitting on a mountain of gold that your father left for this family, not for you. For the family, I have been patient with your little power trip, playing the big businesswoman. But if you do not wire that $50,000 for your sister's future, and if you do not unblock that credit card for our trip, I will make sure everyone in Oakhaven knows exactly what kind of daughter you are." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It is a promise," she hissed. "I have lunch scheduled with the Historical Society board tomorrow. I have tea with the hospital charity committee on Thursday. I will tell them all how you neglect me. I will tell them you force me to beg for medication. I will tell them you are emotionally abusive and that you are starving your own sister. I will paint a picture of elder abuse so vivid that you will not be able to show your face at the country club ever again." "You would lie about me?" I asked, feeling a cold numbness spreading through my limbs. "You would destroy my reputation because I won't give you money?" "I will do what I have to do to protect my real family," she said. "The money is there. You and that baby have enough. You do not need it. Tiffany needs it. Do the right thing. Jocelyn, send the wire, or find out just how loud a mother's cry for help can be." The line went dead. I sat there in the silence of my office. The baby swing clicked rhythmically back and forth. Click, click, click. She had said it again. "You and that baby have enough." It was not just greed. It was a fundamental dehumanization of my child. To Beatrice, Alara was not a person with a future to secure. She was an obstacle absorbing resources that belonged to Tiffany. My mother was willing to accuse me of a felony, elder abuse, to extract cash for a scam. There was no bottom. I had thought there was a limit to their entitlement, but I was wrong. If I gave them the $50,000, next month it would be $100,000. If I let them renovate the study, next year they would sell the house out from under me. They did not see me as a daughter. They saw me as an ATM that had malfunctioned. I looked at the blank screen of my phone. I looked at the pile of legal documents my father had left me, sitting in the safe in the corner of the room. I had never wanted to open the red file, the one marked contingency. My father had hoped I would never have to. He had hoped Beatrice would be content with the generous allowance and the free housing. But Arthur Renford was a man who planned for the worst-case scenario. I stood up. I walked over to the safe and spun the dial. The heavy steel door swung open. I was done negotiating. I was done trying to buy their love. I was done being the dutiful daughter who swallowed insults to keep the peace. My mother wanted a war. She wanted to use the law and public opinion as weapons. She had forgotten that while she was gossiping at tea parties, I had been raised by the man who wrote the contracts. I took out the red file. I took out the phone recording I had just made, because I recorded every call with them, a habit my lawyer had insisted upon years ago. I was not going to send the wire. I was going to call Mr. Harrison. It was time to activate the eviction clause. The morning after my mother threatened to destroy my reputation. I did not cry. I did not panic. I simply put on my sharpest charcoal blazer, the one I usually reserved for hostile board takeovers at Helix Gen, and drove into the city. My destination was not the glass and steel skyscrapers of the financial district, but an unassuming brownstone on a quiet street where the brass plaque next to the door read simply, Harrison Associates. Mr. Harrison had been my father's attorney for 40 years. He was the only man Arthur Renford had ever fully trusted. Perhaps because Harrison was the only person who knew exactly how much money my father had, and exactly how terrified he was of his wife spending it all. When I walked into his office, the smell of leather and lemon polish hit me, instantly transporting me back to those Sunday afternoons with my father. Mr. Harrison was sitting behind his desk, looking like a statue carved from granite and patience. He did not look surprised to see me. "Jocelyn," he said, standing to shake my hand. His grip was firm, dry, and reassuring. "I received your email. I have the files ready." I sat down, placing my phone on the desk between us. It felt heavy, like a loaded gun. "She threatened me." "Edward," I said. I had known him long enough to use his first name, though I rarely did. "She demanded $50,000 for a scheme of Tiffany's, and when I refused, she threatened to ruin my standing in the community with false allegations of elder abuse." Mr. Harrison's expression did not change, but his eyes hardened. He adjusted his glasses and opened the thick, leather-bound folder in front of him. "I am sorry to hear that, Jocelyn, but I cannot say I am shocked. Your father predicted this day would come. He just hoped it would be later rather than sooner. I want to know where I stand," I said, my voice steady. "Legally, not morally, not emotionally. I want to know exactly what power I have." Mr. Harrison turned the folder around so I could see the document. It was the deed to the Connecticut estate, along with the life estate agreement that my mother had signed 3 years ago. "Let us clarify the ownership first," he began, his voice taking on that soothing, rhythmic cadence of a seasoned litigator. "Beatrice believes she owns the house. She does not. The house is the sole property of Renford Holdings, LLC. You are the sole director and managing member of that LLC. Technically, your mother is a tenant who pays 0 rent. Yes, but a tenant nonetheless." He flipped the page to a section highlighted in yellow. "Now, regarding her residency, your father granted her a life estate, which allows her to live there until her death. However, this grant was not unconditional. Arthur insisted on inserting Clause 14, Section C. I leaned in to read the text. The legal jargon was dense, but the meaning was clear. The beneficiary's right to residency is contingent upon the maintenance of the property and the absence of any conduct that causes material financial damage or significant reputational harm to the trustee or the grantor's estate. Reputational harm, I read aloud. Correct, Mr. Harrison said. Threatening to falsely accuse the trustee of a crime, elder abuse, in order to extort funds? That is a textbook violation of Section C. She has breached the covenant of the agreement. So I can evict her? I asked. The words tasted strange in my mouth. Evicting my mother. It sounded monstrous. But then I remembered the way she had looked at Alara. I remembered the $15,000. You can. Mr. Harrison confirmed. But we need evidence. Do you have proof of the threat? I unlocked my phone and played the recording from yesterday. Beatrice's voice filled the quiet office, shrill and venomous. I will paint a picture of elder abuse so vivid that you will not be able to show your face at the country club ever again. Mr. Harrison listened without blinking. When the recording ended, he nodded once. That is admissible. It creates a hostile environment for the trustee. Now, what about the financial aspect? You mentioned unauthorized spending. I pulled out the printed bank statements I had prepared. She spent $2,300 on toys for Tiffany's children, masking it as medical expenses. Then she attempted to spend $15,000 on a vacation to Aspen. I have flagged that charge as fraud with the bank. And the comments about your daughter? He asked gently. I hesitated. This was the hardest part. I have security footage from the living room, from the Christmas party. I showed him the video on my tablet. We watched in silence as Beatrice waved her hand dismissively at my newborn's crib. We heard her say, clearly and coldly, "They are my real family." Mr. Harrison closed the folder. The sound was final, like a gavel striking wood. "Jocelyn," he said, looking me in the eye, "you are not just dealing with a difficult mother. You are dealing with a hostile entity that is actively draining the estate's resources. Your fiduciary duty as the trustee is to protect the assets. If you allow her to continue stealing, and let us be clear, deceiving you about medical costs to buy luxury goods is theft, you are failing in your duty to the trust, and to your daughter, who is the ultimate beneficiary." "I know," I whispered. "We are going to construct a fortress," he said, pulling a legal pad toward him. "We start by cutting the supply lines." For the next 2 hours, we worked with surgical precision. We drafted a formal notice of breach. It was a document that outlined every specific violation: the misuse of the credit card, the attempted extortion, and the unauthorized alteration plans for the study. "We are going to demand repayment, Mr. Harrison said, his pen scratching loudly across the paper. "We are demanding the return of the $2,300 spent on the toys, and the immediate repayment of the $15,000 Aspen deposit if the travel agency refuses a refund. We are also stripping her of all access to credit." "She will starve," I said automatically. "She does not know how to buy groceries." "She will not starve," Harrison corrected. "We will set up a restricted debit card with a fixed weekly allowance for food and gas, $500 a week. If she wants more, she can ask Tiffany." The thought of Tiffany supporting our mother was so laughable I almost smiled. "And the house?" I asked. "We serve this notice first," Harrison advised. "It is a warning shot. It states that her right to reside is now under review due to her conduct. It puts her on notice that she is on probation. If there is one more incident, one more threat, one more dollar stolen, we move to eviction. And given Tiffany's behavior, I strongly suggest we clarify her status as well. Tiffany has no right to residency. She is a guest. You can revoke her invitation at any second." I left the office feeling lighter than I had in years. I carried a folder of documents that felt like a shield. When I arrived back at the estate, the sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the snow. I found Liam in the hallway. He was standing on a ladder, drilling a small hole into the crown molding near the entrance to the living room. "How did it go?" he asked. wiping drywall dust from his hands. "It is done," I said. "We are going to war." Liam climbed down and kissed my forehead. "Good, because I do not trust them. Joss, I remember when Tiffany threw that crystal vase at you because you would not let her borrow your car. If we cut off the money, she is going to explode." "That is why I need the cameras," I said, gesturing to the device in his hand. "Way ahead of you," Liam said. "I bought 4 hidden units, high definition, audio recording, cloud backup, one here, one in the kitchen, one outside the study, and one in the nursery. If they so much as sneeze in the wrong direction, we will have it in 4K resolution. And we might need more," I added, looking toward the guest cottage where the lights were blazing, burning my electricity. "Mr. Harrison suggested private security, just on standby. I have a buddy from the gym who runs a firm," Liam said immediately. "Ex-military. I will call him, just to have someone at the gate." I went into my father's study. My study. I sat at his massive oak desk. I opened the folder Mr. Harrison had given me. Inside was the letter we had drafted. It was cold. It was impersonal. It referred to my mother as the resident and me as the trustee. It demanded the immediate return of the money. It notified her that all credit cards had been canceled effective immediately. It stated that any attempt to renovate the property would result in immediate legal action for vandalism. I picked up my pen. My hand hovered over the signature line. For a split second, I saw my mother's face as it had been when I was a child. Rare moments of softness when she would brush my hair. But then that image was overlaid by the face I had seen yesterday. Twisted with greed, threatening to destroy me for $50,000. She had made her choice. She had chosen her real family. Now, I was choosing mine. I pressed the pen to the paper. My hand was steady. The ink flowed black and permanent. I signed my name, not as Jocelyn the daughter, but as Jocelyn Renford, director of Renford Holdings, LLC. I capped the pen. The bank of the river had burst. I was no longer holding back the flood. I was directing it. And tomorrow morning, they would drown. The trap was set at exactly 2 p.m, but the prey did not walk into it until nearly 4. I sat in the center of the living room, my posture rigid, my hands folded calmly in my lap. To my right sat Liam, his jaw set in a line of granite, his eyes fixed on the heavy oak doors of the entryway. To my left sat a man my mother and sister had never met. His name was Elias Thorne, a senior paralegal from Mr. Harrison's office. He was dressed in a nondescript navy suit, holding a legal pad and a digital stenography pen. He looked like an accountant, or perhaps a dull insurance adjuster. That was the point. He was designed to be ignored until it was too late. The silence in the house was heavy, pressurized like the cabin of an airplane before a crash. We knew they were coming. My phone had been vibrating incessantly for the last 45 minutes, dancing across the coffee table with the desperate rhythm of a heart attack. I did not touch it. I watched the screen light up with the name Mother again and again, followed by a barrage of text messages from Tiffany that I could read without unlocking the device. "Pick up the phone. How dare you? We are coming over." The catalyst for this storm had been a transaction attempt at the sanctuary, the most exclusive day spa in Oak Haven. I knew their schedule because Tiffany had bragged about it on Instagram that morning. They had booked the Royal Indulgence package, massages, facials, and a champagne lunch, totaling roughly $800 per person. At 3:45, my phone stopped ringing. 10 minutes later, the sound of a car engine roaring up the driveway shattered the peace. It was Tiffany's SUV, driven with the erratic aggression of someone who believes traffic laws are merely suggestions. Car doors slammed. Then came the sound of heels clicking rapidly against the stone steps of the front porch. They did not knock. They still had keys, a privilege I had allowed them to keep for emergencies, a privilege that was about to become a liability. The front door swung open with enough force to bang against the interior wall. Beatrice marched in first. Her face flushed a mottled red that clashed with her white fur coat. She was still wearing the plush white robe from the spa underneath her coat. having apparently fled the establishment in such a fury she had not fully dressed. Tiffany followed close behind, her eyes smeared with mascara, looking like a vengeful raccoon. "Jocelyn!" Beatrice screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "Where are you? Show your face!" "We are in here. Mother," I said, my voice projecting calmly from the living room. They stormed around the corner, bringing with them the scent of eucalyptus oil and rage. When Beatrice saw me sitting there, she stopped short, her chest heaving. She looked at me, then at Liam, and finally gave a dismissive, fleeting glance to Mr. Thorne, clearly registering him as irrelevant, perhaps a contractor or a servant. "You," Beatrice hissed, pointing a manicured finger at my face. "Do you have any idea what you just did to me? Do you have any idea of the humiliation?" "I imagine it was quite embarrassing," I said, keeping my tone even. "Embarrassing?" she shrieked. "It was mortifying. I was at the checkout counter. Jocelyn, the receptionist, that little girl who went to school with Tiffany, she told me the card was declined. Declined! In front of Mrs. Vanderbilt, in front of the mayor's wife. She said the card had been reported lost or stolen. They cut it up. They took scissors and cut up my platinum card right in front of my face." "It is my card, Mother," I corrected gently, "and I did report it lost. I lost trust in the person holding it." Tiffany stepped forward, throwing her purse onto the sofa. "You are a psychopath," she spat. "You did that on purpose. You waited until we were done with the treatments just to trap us. Do you know we had to call the manager? Mom had to write a personal check, and they looked at us like we were criminals. You planned this." "I simply secured my finances," I said. "I told you yesterday I was not paying for your lifestyle anymore. You chose not to believe me." Beatrice let out a wail that was half sob, half growl. She threw herself onto the adjacent armchair, burying her face in her hands. It was a performance worthy of Broadway. "I cannot believe this," she moaned into her palms. "My own daughter. I carried you for 9 months. I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. And this is how you repay me? By humiliating me in public over a few $100s? "It was $1,600 today," I noted. "And $15,000 for Aspen, and $2,000 for toys. It adds up. Mother—" "Pennies!" she shouted, dropping her hands and glaring at me with wet, furious eyes. "To you, it is pennies. You sit here in this castle, watching your bank account grow, and you begrudge your mother a massage? You are sick. Jocelyn, you are greedy and sick." "It is not about the money," Liam spoke up, his voice deep and warning. "It is about the respect you stole from her." "Shut up. Liam," Tiffany snapped. "Nobody is talking to you. This is family business." She turned her venom back to me. "We know why you are doing this. Joss, do not pretend it is about the money. You are jealous." I blinked. "Jealous?" "Yes, jealous." Tiffany paced the room, her arms flailing. "You are jealous because Mom loves my kids more than she loves your baby. You are jealous because my boys are fun and alive, and they actually have personalities. Unlike that boring little thing you keep locked in the nursery, you are punishing us because you know, deep down, that we are the core of this family, and you are just the outsider." "Is that true, Mother?" I asked, looking directly at Beatrice. "Is that what you think?" Beatrice stood up. She seemed to swell with indignation, her initial embarrassment giving way to a terrifying arrogance. She looked around the room, my room, with my furniture and my art, and curled her lip. "You want the truth?" she asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Fine. You want to play the big boss? Let us get real. You think this is your house because your name is on some piece of paper? You are wrong." She took a step toward me. Liam shifted in his seat, ready to intercept, but I held up a hand to stop him. I needed her to say it. I needed her to finish the thought. "This is Arthur's house," Beatrice declared, striking her chest with her fist. "This is my husband's house. He built this empire. He earned every dime, and he left it to me. He left it to his family. You? You are just the accountant. You are just the clerk he trusted to handle the paperwork because he knew I was too much of a lady to deal with taxes. The will says otherwise, I said softly. The will is a formality, she screamed. The spirit of the law is what matters. Arthur worked for us, for me, for Tiffany. For his grandchildren, he did not work so you could hoard it all like a dragon. You are holding my property hostage. She leaned over the coffee table, her eyes manic. You have no right to cut me off. I am the matriarch of this family. I decide how the money is spent. I decide who lives here. And I decide who matters. And frankly, Jocelyn, looking at how cold and cruel you have become, maybe Tiffany is right. Maybe you do not deserve to be part of this circle. So, I said, leaning forward slightly, my eyes locking onto hers. Let me be clear. You are saying that this house and the money belong to you, and that my role is simply to serve you, and that because I am refusing to give you money, I am no longer family? I am saying, Beatrice sneered, that real family takes care of each other, and since you refuse to take care of us, since you refuse to recognize that Tiffany's children are the heirs to this legacy, then, yes, you are acting like a stranger. And if you treat me like a stranger, I will treat you like one. I will take you to court. Jocelyn, I will sue you for everything. I will prove that you tricked your father when he was sick. I will prove you are unfit to manage this estate, and I will take it all back. Every single penny. The room hung in silence for 3 seconds. The confession was complete. She had denied my ownership. She had threatened legal action to overturn the trust. She had explicitly stated that she viewed me as a utility, not a daughter. I glanced at Mr. Thorne. He had stopped writing. He looked up, his expression neutral, and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. I let out a long breath, the tension leaving my shoulders. It was done. The trap had snapped shut, and she had not even heard the click. Thank you, Mother, I said. That clarifies everything. Oh, I am not done, she threatened, mistaking my calmness for surrender. You are going to reactivate that card right now, or I am calling my lawyer. You can call him, I said, standing up slowly, but I think you should meet mine first. I gestured to the man on my left. Mother, Tiffany, this is Elias Thorne. He is a senior paralegal and witness for Harrison Associates. Beatrice froze. The color drained from her face so fast, it looked like a curtain falling. She looked at Mr. Thorne, who stood up and adjusted his glasses. Good afternoon, Mrs. Renford. Mr. Thorne said politely. His voice was the dry rustle of legal paper. I have transcribed your statement regarding your intent to contest the will and your assertion of ownership over the trust assets. I also have the audio recording running on the device on the table. He pointed to a small black box sitting next to the vase of lilies, a high-fidelity recorder that had been running since they walked in. Beatrice stared at the box. Then she looked at me. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by the dawning horror of someone realizing they have just walked off a cliff. You recorded me? She whispered. You threatened to destroy my reputation with lies about elder abuse, I said coldly. Did you really think I would meet with you without a witness? Jocelyn. Wait, Tiffany stammered, stepping back. We were just emotional. Mom didn't mean it. She was very specific, I countered. She said the house is hers. She said I am just a clerk. She said I am a stranger. And she threatened to sue the trust. I reached into the folder that Mr. Thorne handed to me. I pulled out a thick envelope. You said that if I treated you like a stranger, you would treat me like one. You said we should talk like strangers. I walked around the coffee table and held the envelope out to her. Beatrice did not take it. She stood paralyzed, her hands trembling by her sides. I placed the envelope gently into her open handbag. What is that? She choked out. That, I said, is a 30-day notice to vacate. Since you claim to be the owner and I am just the keeper, I am exercising my rights as the actual owner to remove a hostile tenant. You have violated the terms of your life estate agreement by threatening the trustee and claiming adverse possession." "You are kicking me out?" Beatrice asked, her voice small and frail, the monster from moments ago shrinking back into the shell of an old woman. "I am protecting the assets for the beneficiary," I said, looking at Tiffany, "which, as you so clearly pointed out, is not you or your children, it is Alara." I turned back to my mother. "You wanted to know what real family does? Real family protects their children from parasites. I am done being your daughter. Beatrice, from this moment on, I am your landlord, and you are a very bad tenant. Jocelyn, please." She started to cry. Reaching for my arm, I stepped back, out of her reach. "Mr. Thorne will see you out," I said. "You have 30 days. I suggest you start packing instead of going to the spa." I turned my back on them. I heard Tiffany gasp. I heard Beatrice sob. But for the first time in my life, I did not turn around to fix it. I walked toward the nursery, toward my daughter, leaving the strangers in my living room to deal with the wreckage they had created. The sun rose over the lake the next morning with a brilliance that felt almost mocking. It was a crisp, clear winter day, the kind of day that usually signaled skiing trips and hot cocoa. But inside the Renford estate, the atmosphere was not festive. It was terminal. I stood at the window of the master bedroom, sipping black coffee, watching the driveway. At exactly 9 in the morning, a county sheriff's cruiser rolled through the open gates. He was not there to arrest anyone. He was there to serve process. In the state of Connecticut, when you evict a family member who claims residency, you do not tape a note to the door. You make it official. I watched as the deputy knocked on the door of the guest cottage. It took 3 minutes for my mother to answer. Even from this distance, I could see the confusion in her body language, followed by the violent snatching of the papers from the officer's hand. She did not look like the matriarch of Oakhaven society. She looked like a frightened, disheveled woman standing in the cold. The countdown had begun. 30 days. But I was not done. The eviction was merely the opening salvo, while Beatrice was staring at the red stamp on her eviction notice. A courier was delivering a separate envelope to Tiffany. For years, I had allowed Tiffany to use a corporate credit card attached to one of my smaller consulting LLCs. It was intended for business development for her various failed startups. I had ignored the charges for spa days and designer shoes because it was easier than fighting. But yesterday, they had declared war, and in war, you audit the supply lines. I had spent the entire night with my forensic accountant. We had recategorized 3 years of Tiffany's spending. It was not business development. It was theft. Tiffany's letter was not an eviction notice. It was a demand for restitution. It listed every single unauthorized transaction, from the $400 sushi dinners to the $2,000 handbags. The total came to $28,450. The letter gave her 48 hours to repay the full amount or face a civil suit for conversion and a criminal referral for embezzlement. I walked downstairs to the kitchen where Liam was feeding Alara. He looked up, a question in his eyes. "The sheriff just left," I said, pouring more coffee. "The clock is ticking." "Do you think they will leave?" Liam asked. "No," I replied, checking the feed from the security cameras on my tablet. "They will fight. They will panic, and then they will destroy themselves." I was right. By noon, the counterattack began. My mother spent the morning making frantic phone calls. I knew this because the call logs for the guest cottage landline were linked to my main account. She called 5 different law firms in Oakhaven and Hartford. She was looking for a shark, someone to tear apart my father's trust and prove that I was unfit. She did not find a shark. She found a wall. Arthur Renford had been a legend in the local legal community. His estate planning was not just thorough, it was a masterclass. Furthermore, every reputable lawyer in town played golf with Mr. Harrison. Word had already spread. No one was going to take a case against the Renford Trust on behalf of a woman known for bouncing checks, especially when the opposing counsel was Harrison Associates. I listened to one of the voicemails she left on the landline, which I could access remotely. "This is Beatrice Renford," she screamed into the receiver. "I need representation immediately. My daughter has stolen my house. I have rights. I am the widow." She was met with rejection after rejection. One secretary even politely informed her that they had a conflict of interest because her firm represented the bank my mother owed money to. With the legal route blocked, they turned to the weapon they knew best: public opinion. At 2 p.m, my phone blew up. It was Sarah again. "Do not look at Facebook," she texted. "Or actually, you need to see this." Tiffany had gone nuclear. She had posted a long, tearful video on her profile, tagging every local news outlet and community group in Oakhaven in the video. She was sitting on the floor of the guest cottage, wearing no makeup, holding her children close like they were refugees in a war zone. "I never thought I would have to do this," Tiffany sobbed into the camera, her acting skills finally finding a purpose. "But my sister, Jocelyn Renford, yes, the big executive at HelixGen, has lost her mind. She is kicking her own mother and sister out on the street right before the holidays. Our mother is sick. She has a heart condition. And Jocelyn just wants the house to herself. She is a monster who hates family. Please, if anyone can help us, we have nowhere to go." The comments section was initially sympathetic. People I had known for years were posting things like, "How awful," and "Money really does change people." The narrative was taking hold. I was the heartless corporate villain. They were the innocent victims. Liam paced the kitchen, his face red. "We have to respond. We have to tell them the truth." "No," I said, opening my laptop. "We do not argue in the comments. Liam, that is low class. We let the truth speak for itself." I had the file ready. It was a 30-second clip from the security footage in the living room. It showed the exact moment Beatrice waved her hand at Alara's crib with a look of disgust. It captured the audio perfectly. "She is a blob. She does not know what day it is." And then, the coup de grace, the line that would haunt her forever. "They are my real family. You have always been independent." I did not post it myself. I sent it to a blind item gossip account on Instagram that covered the Connecticut socialite scene. A page followed by every bored housewife and charity board member in Oakhaven. I added a simple caption: "When the devoted grandmother thinks the camera is off." Real. Family Renford Estate. The video went live at 3 o'clock. By 4 o'clock, the tide had not just turned, it had evaporated. In the insular world of Oakhaven, you can be forgiven for being broke. You can even be forgiven for being rude, but you cannot be forgiven for cruelty to an infant. The image of Beatrice, a woman who prided herself on her maternal image, calling her newborn granddaughter a blob and refusing to hold her because of a silk blouse, was fatal. The comments on Tiffany's post stopped being supportive. They turned vicious. "Wait, isn't that the grandmother who just bought $500 sneakers for the other kids? I heard the audio. She sounds like a monster. Tiffany, maybe you should get a job instead of living off your sister." "Evicting you? Honey, after seeing how your mom treats that baby, I would have thrown you out the window." Beatrice's phone began to ring. But this time it was not lawyers. It was the chairwoman of the Historical Society. It was the head of the hospital charity ball. I could only imagine the conversations. But the result was immediate. Beatrice was uninvited from the New Year's gala. She was removed from the host committee for the winter fundraiser. Her social currency, the only currency she actually cared about, was crashing faster than her credit score. Then came the financial aftershock. Around 5 o'clock, chaos erupted in the guest cottage. I could hear shouting all the way from the main house. I checked the outdoor camera feed. Tiffany was screaming at Beatrice in the driveway. "You said it was refundable!" Tiffany shrieked, throwing her hands in the air. "You said we could get the money back." I pieced it together later. The travel agency had called. I had successfully clawed back the $15,000 payment as unauthorized fraud. However, the agency had informed Beatrice that because she had booked the Saver fare, a non-refundable option that was $2,000 cheaper than the flexible rate, The deposit was forfeit, but here was the kicker. Beatrice had charged my card for the full flexible rate amount, but booked the cheaper rate, intending to pocket the $2,000 difference as spending money. When the cancellation hit, the agency kept the deposit because of her selection. Tiffany had just realized that not only was the Aspen trip dead, but her mother had been planning to skim money off the top of the theft. "You are a liar," Tiffany screamed at her mother. "You ruined everything. Now I have nothing." "I was doing it for us," Beatrice wailed, chasing after her. "I needed cash for the ski lift tickets." "You needed cash for yourself," Tiffany yelled, storming back into the cottage and slamming the door, locking Beatrice out in the cold for a full minute before finally letting her in. The alliance of the real family was fracturing under the weight of its own incompetence. As the sun began to set, desperation set in. They realized they had no money, no legal standing, and no social support. They were trapped in a luxury guest house that was rapidly feeling like a prison. At 7 in the evening, my security system alerted me to motion at the back of the main house. I watched the monitor. It was Beatrice. She had snuck out of the cottage and was creeping toward the French doors of my father's old study. She looked manic, her hair unkempt. Muttering to herself, she reached for the keypad on the door. She punched in a code. 1955, her birth year. The light flashed red. She tried again. 0810, Tiffany's birthday, red. She tried a third time. 1, 2, 3, 4, red. And then, a piercing electronic chirp as the system locked down for 5 minutes due to failed attempts. Beatrice slumped against the glass, defeated. She pressed her face against the pane, peering into the dark office. "It is in there," I heard her whisper to herself. The audio captured by the exterior camera. "The real Will. He would not leave me with nothing. He loved me. The real Will is in the safe." She was delusional. There was no real Will. There was only the document she had signed and ignored 3 years ago. She was chasing a ghost because she could not face the reality that she was the architect of her own demise. I picked up my phone and opened the app for the smart locks. With a single tap, I engaged the vacation mode protocol. This disabled all guest codes and secondary key fobs. Even if they had a physical key, the deadbolts were now electronically engaged from the inside. They could not get into the main house. They could not get into the garage. They were confined to the guest cottage and the driveway. I sent a text to Tiffany. "I see Mom trying to break into the study. The police have been notified that there is a prowler on the property. If she tries the door again, the alarm will trigger a dispatch. Keep her inside." I saw Tiffany run out of the cottage a moment later, grabbing her mother by the arm and dragging her back. Beatrice was sobbing, pointing at the house, screaming about her rights, about the injustice, about the real family. Tiffany shoved her mother inside and slammed the door. I sat back in my chair. The house was quiet. Alara was asleep in her crib. Safe. Liam was reading in the living room, a baseball bat leaning casually against the wall. Just in case. They were cut off. The money was gone. The credit was dead. The friends had fled. And the locks were changed. Panic had officially set in. They had 30 days to leave, but looking at the way they were turning on each other, I doubted they would last a week. The counterstrike was complete. Now, I just had to wait for the surrender, or the explosion. Desperation has a scent. It smells like stale coffee, nervous sweat, and the metallic tang of bad decisions. For 3 days, that scent had been wafting from the guest cottage. Drifting across the frozen lawn to the main house, I knew they were drowning. I knew the walls were closing in, but I did not anticipate that they would try to break down mine. It was a Tuesday morning. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening snow. I had an appointment for Alara's 2-week checkup at the pediatrician in downtown Oak Haven. It was the perfect window of opportunity, or so they thought. They watched me leave. They watched Liam's truck pull out 10 minutes later for a site visit. They saw the house go dark. They assumed the house was sleeping. They forgot that the house never sleeps. I was sitting in the waiting room, flipping through an old magazine while Ilara dozed in her carrier. When my phone vibrated, it was not a text. It was a specific, rhythmic pulse that I had programmed only for the most critical alert. Silent alarm. Zone 4. Master study. Glass break sensor bypass. My heart did not race. Instead, it slowed down to a cold, heavy thud. I did not panic. I opened the security app on my phone. The image that loaded was crystal clear. A 4K stream of betrayal in real time. There were 3 people in my father's study. 2 of them I knew better than I knew myself. The third was a man I had never seen before. A scruffy figure in a greasy mechanic's jumpsuit, holding a lockpicking kit. He wasn't a professional locksmith. No reputable tradesman would touch this job. He was someone Tiffany had likely dredged up from the darker corners of the internet. "It is open," the man said, his voice tinny through the microphone. "That will be $300, cash." "Just go," Tiffany snapped, shoving a wad of bills at him. "And keep your mouth shut." The man left, disappearing out the French doors he had just shimmied open. Tiffany turned to Beatrice. They looked frantic. My mother was wearing her fur coat inside, shivering not from cold, but from adrenaline. Tiffany was wearing leather gloves, a detail that made my stomach churn. She was trying to avoid fingerprints. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. This was a premeditated burglary. "Hurry up, Mom," Tiffany hissed, pulling open the drawers of my filing cabinet. "Jocelyn keeps the emergency cash in here somewhere, or the bearer bonds. Dad always talked about bearer bonds." "I am looking," Beatrice cried, moving toward the desk. I watched, mesmerized by the horror of it. As my mother sat in my chair, her husband's chair, and opened my laptop, it was locked, of course. "What is the password?" Beatrice muttered, her fingers hovering over the keys. "Think, Beatrice, what would she use?" She typed something. The screen flashed red. "Try my birthday," Tiffany shouted from across the room, where she was tossing files onto the floor. "She is obsessed with me. Or maybe the day Dad died." Beatrice typed again. 0810. Tiffany's birthday. Access denied. "It is not working," Beatrice wailed. "She changed it. That ungrateful wrench changed the passwords." "Forget the computer," Tiffany yelled. "Look for the safe key. It has to be in the desk." I sat in the pediatrician's waiting room, Ilara sleeping peacefully at my feet, and I pressed the button on my screen labeled Police Dispatch. I did not speak to anyone. I simply confirmed the emergency. The system automatically sent the address and the live video feed to the Oak Haven Police Department. I could have driven home immediately. I could have called the house line to scare them off. But I didn't. I sat there and watched. I needed to see the extent of their rot. I needed to know exactly what they were capable of when they thought no one was watching. On the screen, Tiffany had found a thick red folder in the bottom drawer. My breath hitched. That was not cash. That was Ilara's file. It contained her birth certificate, her social security card, and the deed to the trust fund my father had set up for his future grandchildren. The fund that Tiffany's children were excluded from because of the specific wording regarding drug testing and academic performance criteria. Tiffany's kids had unfortunately failed to meet due to their mother's negligence. Tiffany opened the folder. She read the title, Ilara's Education Trust Agreement. "Look at this," Tiffany whispered, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hate. "Look at this. She has millions in here for that baby. Millions. And my boys get nothing?" "Take it," Beatrice said, distracted by a box she had found in the desk. "We can leverage it." "No," Tiffany said. "I am not taking it." She gripped the papers in both hands. With a guttural scream, she ripped the document in half. Then she ripped it again. She threw the confetti of legal paper into the air, stomping on it with her boots. "There," she screamed. "Now nobody gets it. If my kids can't have it, your little brat can't either." I felt a coldness spread through my veins that had nothing to do with the winter air. Destroying property was one thing, but destroying a child's future out of spite? That was evil. Meanwhile, Beatrice had found what she was looking for. It wasn't cash, it was the corporate stamp, the heavy embossed seal of Renford Holdings LLC, and next to it, she found a spare checkbook I kept for vendor payments. "I found it," Beatrice gasped. "The stamp. I can authorize the check myself. If I stamp it, the bank has to honor it. That is how Arthur did it." She was delusional. That was not how banking worked in the 21st century. But in her desperate, archaic mind, the stamp was a magic wand. She grabbed a pen and began frantically writing a check. 50,000, she muttered. "No, make it 100. For damages. For emotional distress." She pressed the heavy seal onto the paper, leaning her entire body weight into it. Believing she was minting her own salvation. "We are rich again, Tiff," Beatrice laughed. A manic, high-pitched sound. "We just go to the bank and—" The audio on the camera picked up a sound from the driveway. Sirens. Not the distant wail of a passing ambulance, but the sharp, aggressive yelp of police cruisers pulling up to the front door. Beatrice froze. The pen dropped from her hand. "What is that?" she whispered. "Cops!" Tiffany shouted, running to the window. "Oh my God. Mom, it's the cops. She called the cops." "Hide the check." Beatrice screamed, shoving the paper into her bra. "Tell them we live here. Tell them we lost our keys." I closed the app. I stood up, picked up Alara's carrier, and walked to the receptionist. "I am so sorry," I said calmly. "I have a family emergency. I need to reschedule." The drive home was a blur of gray sky and white snow. When I turned onto my street, the scene was like something from a movie, but devoid of any glamour. 3 police cars were parked in my driveway, their lights flashing silently against the dark evergreens. The front door was open. I parked the car and stepped out. The air was freezing. I walked up the steps, the sound of my boots crunching on the gravel the only noise I made. Inside, the living room was a tableau of disgrace. Tiffany was pressed against the wall, her hands cuffed behind her back. She was shouting at a young officer, spitting venom about how this was all a misunderstanding. Beatrice was sitting on the sofa, weeping loudly, clutching her chest, while a female officer stood over her, holding the crumpled check she had retrieved from my mother's person. When I walked in, the room went silent. "Mrs. Renford?" the sergeant asked. He was a man named Miller, someone who had known my father. He looked embarrassed to be there. "We received a silent alarm and a verified feed of a break-in." "Yes," I said, setting Alara's carrier down safely away from them. "I authorized the dispatch." "Jocelyn!" Beatrice screamed when she saw me. She tried to lunge forward, but the officer held her back. Tell them this is a mistake. Tell them I live here." I looked at her. I looked at the fur coat she was wearing. I looked at the ink stain on her finger from the stamp pad. "She does not live here," I said to Sergeant Miller. "She was served an eviction notice 3 days ago. She resides in the guest cottage. She has no key and no authorization to be in the main house, specifically not in my private office." "She is your mother!" Tiffany yelled. "You are arresting your own mother?" "I am arresting 2 intruders who broke into my home, destroyed legal documents, and attempted to forge a corporate check," I corrected. "We didn't steal anything," Tiffany insisted. "We were just looking for papers." "We have the video, ma'am," Sergeant Miller said dryly. "We saw you ripping up the trust documents, and we have the check Mrs. Renford attempted to forge, that is burglary, destruction of property, and attempted fraud." He turned to his deputy. "Read them their rights." "No!" Beatrice shrieked as the officer pulled her hands behind her back. The click of the handcuffs was loud and final. "Jocelyn, please. I am old. I cannot go to jail. I will die in there. Please, just tell them to stop. I am sorry. I will give the check back." She looked at me, her eyes wide with terror. For the first time, she saw me not as a resource, not as a scapegoat, but as the person holding the keys to her life. "I am your family," she sobbed. "We are your real family." I walked over to them. I stood close enough that I could smell the fear on them, mixed with Tiffany's cloying perfume. "You are right, Mother," I said softly. "Real family would not call the police on each other." Beatrice's face flooded with relief. Yes, exactly. So tell them, but real family," I interrupted, my voice turning to ice, "would not break into my house. Real family would not call my daughter a blob. The real family would not steal from me. Real family would not destroy a baby's future because they were jealous." I leaned in closer. "You told me that Tiffany and her boys were your real family. You told me I was a stranger. Well, Mother, strangers do not get bail money. Strangers do not get mercy." I turned to Sergeant Miller. "I want to press full charges: burglary, attempted grand larceny, destruction of property, and check fraud. Take them away." "Jocelyn!" Beatrice screamed, a sound that tore through the house like a wounded animal. "You cannot do this. I am your mother." "You were my mother," I said, turning my back on them to pick up Alara. "Now, you are just a defendant." I did not watch them leave. I heard the scuffle of feet, the heavy thud of the door closing, and the fading wail of sirens. The house was suddenly very quiet. I walked into the study. The floor was littered with the confetti of Alara's trust fund. The desk was a mess, but the computer was still secure. The safe was still locked. I sat down in my father's chair. I looked at the empty space where they had been. It was over. The leech had been severed. The wound would bleed for a while, but for the first time in 30 years, the infection was gone. I picked up the phone to call Mr. Harrison. We had work to do. The conference room at Harrison Associates was designed to intimidate. It was a cavernous space of polished mahogany, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hartford skyline, and air conditioning set to a temperature that felt clinically detached. I sat on one side of the massive table, flanked by Mr. Harrison and Elias Thorne. On the other side sat the remnants of my family. It had been 4 days since the arrest. Beatrice and Tiffany were out on bail, a sum I had conspicuously refused to post, forcing them to use a bail bondsman who charged a predatory 15% interest rate. They looked haggard. Beatrice's roots were showing, her usually immaculate hair pulled back in a severe fraying bun. Tiffany wore a conservative dress that I recognized as one she had bought for a funeral 5 years ago, trying to project an image of demure innocence that clashed violently with the ankle monitor blinking beneath her hem. Representing them was a man named Mr. Sallow. He was not a shark. He was a bottom feeder. He was a strip mall attorney who advertised on the back of bus benches, the kind of lawyer you hired when you had no money and a case that was already half lost. His suit was ill-fitting, and he smelled faintly of stale tobacco and desperation. "My clients are victims here," Mr. Sallow began, trying to project confidence but failing to meet Mr. Harrison's steel gaze. "We are looking at a clear case of entrapment. Furthermore, we intend to challenge the validity of the eviction based on the principle of grandparents' rights. Mrs. Renford has a biological right to access her grandchild, and by evicting her, you are infringing upon that relationship." I almost laughed. It was a desperate Hail Mary. In Connecticut, grandparents' rights are notoriously difficult to prove, especially when the grandmother in question is on video calling the grandchild a blob. Mr. Harrison did not laugh. He simply adjusted his glasses and opened a file. "Mr. Sallow," Harrison said, his voice bored. "We are not here to debate family law. We are here to discuss the felony charges pending against your clients for burglary, fraud, and destruction of property. However, since you brought up the validity of the estate and the eviction, I think it is time we stop dancing." Harrison signaled to Elias, who dimmed the lights and pressed a button on the wall-mounted screen. "What is this?" Beatrice asked, her voice trembling. "I do not want to watch any more of your spy camera footage. Jocelyn, This is not a spy camera, I said softly. This is a message from the grave. The screen flickered to life. The video was grainy. Dated about 6 months before my father died. My father, Arthur Renford, sat in the very chair I now occupied in my study. He looked thin, the cancer already hollowing out his cheeks, but his eyes were sharp as flint. Beatrice gasped. "Arthur?" On the screen, my father looked directly into the lens. "My name is Arthur Renford," the video Arthur said, his voice raspy but clear. "I am recording this statement to accompany my final will and testament, specifically regarding the establishment of the Renford Master Trust." He took a sip of water, his hand shaking slightly. "I have been married to Beatrice for 35 years. I love her, but I am not blind. She has no concept of money, and more importantly, she has allowed our daughter Tiffany to become a parasite. I have watched them treat Jocelyn like a servant for decades. They mistake her kindness for weakness." In the conference room, the silence was absolute. Tiffany was staring at the screen, her mouth slightly open. Beatrice was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "I know Beatrice," my father continued. "I know that when I am gone, she will try to manipulate Jocelyn. She will try to guilt her into handing over the estate. She will say things like family money, and it is what Arthur wanted. So, let me be clear on the record. It is not what I want." He leaned forward, his face filling the frame. "If Beatrice or Tiffany ever attempt to contest Jocelyn's authority, or if they ever treat Jocelyn with the disrespect I have witnessed in the past, they are to be cut off completely. No allowance, no housing, nothing. Jocelyn is the sole guardian of this family's legacy because she is the only one who helped me build it. If you are watching this, Beatrice, it means you have pushed her too far. And if you have pushed her too far, you have lost everything. That is my will." The screen went black. The lights came back on. The room felt smaller, tighter. "Mr. Sallow loosened his tie. He looked at his clients, realizing he had just walked into a firing squad with a water pistol. The video was devastating. It established clear intent. It destroyed any argument that I was misinterpreting my father's wishes. "Well, Mr. Sallow stammered, shuffling his papers. "That is compelling. However, we must consider my client's mental state. Beatrice is an elderly woman. She has been under immense stress. We are prepared to argue that she is suffering from early onset cognitive decline. She did not understand the nature of her actions when she entered the study. She was confused. She thought she was signing a permission slip, not a check. You cannot prosecute a woman who is losing her faculties. It was the dementia defense. It was their backup parachute. If they couldn't win on rights, they would win on pity. They wanted to paint Beatrice as a senile old lady who had wandered into a crime scene by accident. I opened my folder. "Cognitive decline?" I asked. "Is that your official stance?" "Yes," Sallow nodded, gaining a bit of steam. "Mrs. Renford is fragile. She is easily confused by technology and finances." "Interesting," I said, "because I have the browser history from her iPad for the week leading up to the break-in. Would you like to hear the search terms?" I pulled out a sheet of paper. January 10th, non-extradition countries for financial crimes. January 11th, how to liquidate trust assets without trustee signature. January 12th, Aspen luxury rentals with private chefs. And my personal favorite, from the morning of the break-in, how to bypass silent alarm systems model X500. I slid the paper across the table to Mr. Sallow. "That does not look like confusion to me, counselor. That looks like premeditation. She was lucid enough to research how to commit the crime. She was lucid enough to try 4 different birth dates to crack my password. She was lucid enough to distinguish between the corporate seal and the notary seal. A senile woman does not Google extradition laws. A criminal does." "Mr. Sallow stared at the paper. He closed his file. He knew it was over. "We also have the matter of your other client." "Mr. Harrison interjected, turning his gaze to Tiffany. While Beatrice might attempt to plead ignorance, Tiffany is on camera physically destroying a legal document, the deed to the grandchild's trust. That is malicious destruction of property. Combined with the burglary, she is looking at a mandatory minimum of 3 to 5 years in state prison. Tiffany slammed her hand on the table. "I am not going to prison," she shrieked. "I am a single mother. No jury in the world will send a mother to jail for ripping up a piece of paper. I was protecting my children's rights." "You ripped up a document that provided education funds for a newborn baby," Harrison corrected calmly. "And you did it while screaming that if your kids could not have it, no one could. That is not protection. That is malice. And juries do not like malice." Tiffany looked around the room, wild-eyed. She looked at her lawyer, who was avoiding her gaze. She looked at her mother, who was staring at her hands. "So," I said, leaning back in my chair, "here is the offer. It is the only offer you are going to get." I placed a single document in the center of the table. 1. You both vacate the property within 48 hours, not 30 days, 2 days. 2. You sign this agreement waiving all future claims to the Renford estate. You acknowledge that the allowance is permanently revoked. You acknowledge that you have no rights to the house, the investments, or the trust. 3. You sign a permanent restraining order. You will never contact me, Liam, or Alara again. You will stay at least 500 yards away from us at all times. If you do this, I concluded, I will drop the criminal charges. I will tell the district attorney that we have reached a civil settlement and I do not wish to pursue prosecution. You will walk away with a clean record, but with empty pockets. And if we refuse, Sallow asked weakly, then we go to trial. Mr. Harrison said, we play that video of Arthur for the jury. We play the video of Beatrice calling the baby a blob. We show the search history, and my client testifies. And when we win, which we will, Beatrice will spend her twilight years in a minimum security facility, and Tiffany will lose custody of her children because she will be a convicted felon. The room was silent for a long time. The hum of the air conditioner sounded like a roar. I will not sign it, Tiffany hissed. She crossed her arms, her chin jutting out in that familiar stubborn pose she had used since she was a teenager. You are bluffing. You won't send your own sister to jail. It would look too bad for your precious company. The press would eat you alive. Biotech executive jails struggling sister. I will take my chances with a jury. They will see that I am just a mom fighting for her share. She was gambling on my guilt. She was gambling on the idea that I still cared about appearances. She was wrong. I am not bluffing, Tiffany, I said. I have already drafted the press release explaining the embezzlement. I am ready. I don't believe you, Tiffany sneered. Mom, don't sign it. We can fight this. We can go on TV. We can get a GoFundMe. People will help us. Beatrice slowly lifted her head. She looked at Tiffany. Then she looked at the screen where Arthur's face had been. She looked at the paper detailing her search history. Beatrice was a narcissist, but she was also a survivor. She realized something Tiffany did not. The ship was sinking, and there was only one life vest. Tiffany, Beatrice said, her voice shaking. He said Arthur said I would lose everything. He's dead. Mom, Tiffany snapped. Who cares what he said? I care, Beatrice shouted. Surprising everyone, she turned on her daughter, her eyes wide with panic. I care because I do not want to go to jail. I cannot wear an orange jumpsuit. Tiffany, I have a heart condition. You are going to let her win? Tiffany yelled. After everything she did to us? You did this. Beatrice pointed a trembling finger at Tiffany. You told me to break into the study. You told me she had cash. You told me to use the stamp. I wanted to wait. But you said we needed the money for the tea business. It is your fault. My fault? Tiffany stood up, knocking her chair over. You are the one who spent $15,000 on a ski trip. You are the one who treats Alara like garbage. I was just trying to get what was ours. "It is not ours," Beatrice cried, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "It is hers. Arthur gave it to her, and if I do not sign this, she is going to put me in a cage." Beatrice grabbed the pen from Mr. Sallow's hand. She did not read the document. She did not ask for a revision. She frantically scribbled her signature on the line marked Defendant 1. "Mom!" Tiffany screamed. "What are you doing?" "I am saving myself," Beatrice sobbed. She pushed the paper toward me. "There. I signed it. I signed it. Jocelyn, please. I will leave. I will go to my cousin's house in Florida. Just do not send me to jail." I looked at the signature. It was shaky, but it was valid. "Smart choice, Mother," I said. I looked at Tiffany. She was standing alone. Her ally had just defected. The real family had dissolved the moment consequences became real. "Your turn, Tiffany," I said. "Never," she spat. "I would rather rot than bow to you." "That, Mr." Harrison said, closing his file with a sharp snap, "can be arranged." I picked up the document with Beatrice's signature. "Mr. Sallow," I said. "The deal for Beatrice is accepted. She is free to go, provided she is off the property by noon tomorrow. As for Tiffany," I looked at my sister one last time. I saw the hate in her eyes, the utter refusal to take responsibility. "We will see you in court." Tiffany stormed out of the room, slamming the heavy mahogany door so hard the windows rattled. Beatrice stayed behind, weeping into her hands, muttering about how she had been led astray. I felt nothing, no triumph, no sadness, just the cold satisfaction of a balance sheet finally zeroing out. The legal fortress had held. The enemy was divided, and now, the final judgment was coming. The Superior Court of Hartford County was a place where emotions usually went to die, strangled by the cold hands of procedure and precedent. Courtroom 4 was no exception. It smelled of floor wax and old paper, a sterile purgatory where the wreckage of my family life was about to be sorted into legal piles of plaintiff and defendant. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my back straight, my hands clasped on the polished wood. To my right sat Mr. Harrison, looking as immovable as a mountain, across the aisle. Tiffany sat with a public defender who looked like he had not slept in 3 days. Beside them sat my mother, Beatrice. Despite signing the plea deal to avoid prison, she was required to be here for the civil judgment regarding the restitution of funds and the finalization of the permanent restraining order. She looked small, shrunken inside a coat that was no longer new, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped bird. The presiding judge was the Honorable Percival Sterling. He was a man of 60 with a face carved from granite and a reputation for having absolutely zero tolerance for histrionics. He did not care about tears. He did not care about sob stories. He cared about the law. Tiffany's strategy, executed by her exhausted lawyer, was predictable. They were trying to paint me as the villain of a Dickensian tragedy. "Your Honor," the public defender began, shuffling his notes nervously, "we are painting a picture here not of theft, but of a family dispute gone wrong. My client, Tiffany Renford, and her mother, Beatrice, have been victims of a systematic campaign of financial isolation. The plaintiff, Jocelyn Renford, controls the entirety of the father's estate. She has used this power to manipulate, control, and ultimately discard her own flesh and blood. Is it reasonable to evict an elderly woman and a single mother into the snow simply because of a misunderstanding over a credit card bill? We argue that this is an abuse of the trustee's power and a violation of the moral obligation inherent in any family unit." Judge Sterling peered over his spectacles. He did not look impressed. "Counselor," the judge rumbled, his voice deep and gravelly, "moral obligations are for Sunday school. I am here to adjudicate the life estate contract and the alleged misappropriation of funds. Do you have evidence of this manipulation?" "We have the testimony of a mother who feels abandoned," the lawyer said weakly. "Feelings are not facts," Judge Sterling snapped. "Mr. Harrison, your witness." Mr. Harrison stood up, He did not deliver a speech. He simply plugged his laptop into the court's audiovisual system. "Your Honor," Mr. Harrison said, his voice carrying to the back of the room. "The defense claims that my client evicted her family due to a misunderstanding. We intend to prove that the eviction was the result of a fundamental breach of the residency agreement, specifically, the clause regarding hostile conduct and the safety of the beneficiaries. To understand why Ms. Jocelyn Renford took such drastic action, the court must understand the nature of the hostility." He pressed a key. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. It was the footage from Christmas Day. The courtroom was silent, save for the hum of the projector. On the screen, the image was crisp. We saw the warm glow of my living room. We saw Beatrice enter in her silk blouse. We saw me offer her the baby. And then, the entire room watched as my mother recoiled. The audio was piercingly clear in the acoustically treated room. I am not risking projectile vomit or drool on a dry clean-only garment. A ripple of murmurs went through the gallery. The jury, 6 people selected for this civil hearing, shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but the video played on. It showed Beatrice handing over the expensive gifts to Tiffany's sons. It showed her taking a sip of wine and delivering the line that had severed our relationship forever. "Alara is just a baby. She is a blob. She does not know what day it is. Tiffany's boys are my real family." Beatrice, sitting at the defense table, squeezed her eyes shut. Tiffany stared at the floor, her face burning a dull red. Mr. Harrison paused the video on the frame where Beatrice was turning her back on the crib. "Real family," Mr. Harrison repeated, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. "Your Honor, this is not a woman being manipulated. This is a woman stating her preference. She explicitly defined her family unit, and it did not include the plaintiff or the plaintiff's infant daughter." Judge Sterling looked at the screen, then at Beatrice. His expression was one of undisguised distaste. "Proceed," the judge said, his tone icy. "We also submit Exhibit B." Mr. Harrison continued, regarding the claim that the defendants were merely confused about their financial rights. The screen changed. Now it showed the black and white footage of the study break-in. It showed the moment Tiffany found the red folder containing Alara's education trust. The violence of the action was shocking on the big screen. Tiffany ripping the papers, Tiffany stomping on them, Tiffany screaming, "If my kids can't have it, your little brat can't either." The jury was no longer shifting. They were leaning forward, their faces hardening. This was not a misunderstood single mother. This was a vandal driven by malice. "This, Mr. Harrison said, pointing to the screen, "is the conduct of the victims. They broke into a locked office, hired an unlicensed locksmith, and destroyed a legal document intended for the benefit of a 2-week-old child. This is not a dispute. This is a raid." Mr. Harrison sat down. The silence in the room was absolute. "Ms. Renford," Judge Sterling said, looking at me, "please take the stand." I walked to the witness box. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. I sat down, smoothing the fabric of my skirt. I looked at my mother and sister. They looked like strangers. "Ms. Renford," Mr. Harrison asked, standing by his table, "why did you initiate eviction proceedings?" I took a breath. I spoke clearly, directing my words to the jury. "For 3 years, I paid for everything," I began. "I paid the mortgage. I paid the utility bills, which often exceeded $1,000 a month in the winter. I paid for Tiffany's car insurance. I paid for my mother's country club dues. I did this because I believed that it was my duty. I believed that if I paid enough, if I was good enough, they would eventually love me as much as they loved each other." I paused. I felt a lump in my throat, but I swallowed it down. But on Christmas Day, I realized that the transaction was fraudulent. I was buying a product that did not exist. When my mother looked at my daughter, her own granddaughter, and called her a blob, when she refused to hold her because of a blouse, I realized that I was not a daughter to her. I was a wallet. And when they broke into my office to steal from that same baby, I realized they were dangerous. I did not evict them to be cruel. I evicted them to protect my child from people who view her as a financial competitor. Judge Sterling turned his chair to face the defense table. He looked directly at Beatrice. "Mrs. Beatrice Renford," the judge said. "Stand up." My mother stood, trembling. She gripped the table for support. "I have watched the video," Judge Sterling said. "I have heard the audio. I want to ask you one question, and I advise you to answer it honestly, as it will weigh heavily on my judgment regarding the damages." The judge leaned forward. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why did you treat your 2 grandchildren so differently? Why did you spend thousands on one set and refuse to hold the other?" Beatrice opened her mouth. She looked at Tiffany, then at me. She stammered. Well, Your Honor, she has had a hard life. She needs me. The boys need me. Jocelyn has always been so strong. She has the money. She has the career. She did not need my help." "We are not talking about help," Judge Sterling corrected sharply. "We are talking about affection. We are talking about basic human decency. You told your daughter she was not real family. Do you stand by that statement?" Beatrice looked trapped. If she said yes, she was a monster. If she said no, she was a perjurer. "I was angry," she whispered. "I felt entitled. My husband left the money I thought was ours." "It was never yours," Judge Sterling said. "It was a trust you violated." Mr. Harrison stood up for his closing statement. He buttoned his jacket and walked to the center of the room. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defense asks for mercy based on the bonds of family, but the evidence shows that the defendants severed those bonds long ago. Mrs. Beatrice Renford wants the benefits of a family, the housing, the money, the protection, without any of the obligations. She wants to be supported by the daughter she despises while lavishing resources on the daughter she prefers." He gestured toward Tiffany and Beatrice. Beatrice Renford made a choice. She chose her real family. She chose Tiffany. Therefore, it is the position of the plaintiff that the court should honor her choice. If Tiffany is her real family, then Tiffany should be the one to house her. Tiffany should be the one to feed her. Tiffany should be the one to pay for her lifestyle. My client, Jocelyn, is merely granting her mother the independence she so clearly established on Christmas Day. We ask for full restitution of the $28,000 stolen, a permanent eviction order, and a restraining order to ensure that my client and her daughter are never subjected to this toxicity again. Judge Sterling nodded. He checked his watch. He did not need to deliberate for long. He did not need to send the jury out for hours. The facts were as stark as the black robes he wore. He picked up his gavel. The sound of wood hitting wood had never seemed so loud. "The court is ready to render judgment," Judge Sterling announced. The air in the room grew tight, vibrating with the energy of a storm about to break. Beatrice was sobbing quietly. Tiffany was staring at the judge with a look of defiance that was rapidly crumbling into fear. I sat still. I watched the man who held the final piece of my liberation in his hands. The climax of 100 years of family history, or at least, it felt that long, had arrived. The gavel was raised, the breath was held, and the truth was about to be cemented in law. Judge Sterling did not look at the defendants when he spoke. He looked at the paperwork in front of him, aligning the edges with a precision that mirrored the finality of his decision. The courtroom was so quiet that I could hear the hum of the heating vents and the ragged, shallow breathing of my mother 3 tables away. The gavel had struck, not just as a signal for order, but as the final punctuation mark on a sentence that had been written 30 years ago. "After reviewing the evidence," Judge Sterling began, his voice devoid of any warmth, "the court finds exclusively in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Jocelyn Renford." He adjusted his glasses and looked down at Beatrice. "Mrs. Renford, You claimed in this court that you were entitled to the property based on marital history. However, the law is clear. You signed a life estate agreement that was contingent upon specific behavioral clauses. You violated those clauses. You threatened the trustee. You committed financial fraud against the estate, and most egregiously, you demonstrated a clear intent to harm the primary beneficiary, your grandchild, both emotionally and financially. Therefore, your right to residency is hereby revoked. Beatrice let out a sound that was less like a cry and more like a balloon losing air. She slumped in her chair, her hand clutching her chest. The eviction is effective immediately, the judge continued, his tone hardening. Given the severity of the unauthorized access to the plaintiff's home, the court is not granting the standard 30-day window. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. At noon on Thursday, the sheriff's department will arrive to escort you off the property. Anything left behind will be considered abandoned. Tiffany stood up, her face flushed with panic. 48 hours? That is impossible. We have nowhere to go. You cannot put a single mother on the street in winter. Sit down, Ms. Renford, Judge Sterling barked. You should have thought about your housing situation before you broke into a locked office and destroyed legal documents. The court has no sympathy for self-inflicted wounds. He turned back to the papers. Regarding the financial restitution, the defendants are jointly and severally liable for the misappropriated funds. This includes the $28,450 embezzled by Tiffany Renford via the corporate card, the $15,000 lost in the travel deposit fraud committed by Beatrice Renford, and the legal fees incurred by the plaintiff. The total judgment is set at $53,000. This amount will be garnished from any future state benefits or wages until paid in full. $53,000. It was a number that would shackle them for years. It was the price of their arrogance. Finally, the judge said, picking up a separate document, we address the safety of the plaintiff, based on the video evidence of the break-in, the verbal threats made by the defendants, and the malicious destruction of the child's trust fund. I am granting the request for a permanent restraining order. He looked directly at Beatrice and Tiffany. You are to have no contact with Jocelyn Renford, Liam Renford, or the minor child, Elara Renford. This includes physical proximity of less than 500 feet, electronic communication, third-party communication, or social media harassment. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and mandatory jail time. Do you understand? But she is my daughter, Beatrice wailed, finally finding her voice. She is my baby. She is the plaintiff, Judge Sterling corrected coldly, and you are a danger to her family. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down one last time. It was a sharp, wooden crack that severed the umbilical cord. Mr. Harrison closed his laptop. He turned to me and offered a rare, genuine smile. It is over, Jocelyn. You are free. I stood up. I felt lightheaded, not from stress, but from the sudden, overwhelming absence of it, the weight I had been carrying since I was a child, the need to please, the need to fix, the need to buy love was gone. Thank you, Edward, I said, for everything. I turned to leave. Liam was waiting for me at the gate of the bar. His hand extended. I took it. His grip was warm and solid. We walked down the aisle, past the rows of empty benches. As we reached the double doors at the back of the courtroom, I heard a scramble of footsteps behind us. Jocelyn, wait! I stopped. I did not turn around immediately. I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the voice that had controlled me for so long. Then, slowly, I turned. Beatrice was rushing toward me, her coat flapping open, her face a mask of desperate, terrified grief. Tiffany was lagging behind her, looking furious, typing frantically on her phone, likely trying to spin a new narrative or find a couch to crash on. Beatrice stopped a few feet away from me, halted by the presence of the bailiff who had stepped forward. Jocelyn, please, Beatrice gasped, tears streaming down her face. You cannot do this. 48 hours? Where will I go? Florida is too far. I have no money for the flight. The judge took everything. You took everything, Mother, I said calmly. You took my money. You took my patience. And you tried to take my daughter's future. I was confused, she pleaded, reaching out a hand as if to touch me. I am your mother. I love you. I only said those things because I was stressed. I did not mean it. Please, let me see Alara. Just once. Let me say goodbye to my granddaughter. She is my flesh and blood. I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the lines of age, the panic in her eyes, the pathetic trembling of her hands, but I also saw the woman who had sneered at my newborn. I saw the woman who had tried to stamp a fraudulent check while the police were on their way. I felt a profound sense of pity, but it was the kind of pity you feel for a character in a tragedy who refuses to learn their lesson. You said it yourself, I said, my voice steady and loud enough for Tiffany to hear. You said blood does not matter as much as who you choose. You chose your real family. You said Tiffany and her boys were the only ones who counted. I didn't mean it, she sobbed. You meant it when you said it, I replied. And that is enough for me. You were right about one thing. Beatrice, family is about how you treat people. And the way you treated us made you a stranger. I stepped closer, just for a second, to look her dead in the eye. Alara does not have a grandmother. She has a mother who protects her, and that is all she needs. Goodbye, Mrs. Renford. I turned around. I did not run. I walked. Jocelyn, she screamed after me. Jocelyn, you come back here. I gave you life. I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped out into the hallway, leaving her voice trapped inside the courtroom. We walked out of the courthouse and into the winter sunlight. The air was crisp and clean. It tasted like snow and freedom. We got into Liam's truck. I sat in the passenger seat and buckled my seatbelt as Liam pulled away from the curb. I looked into the side mirror. I saw them coming out of the courthouse doors. Beatrice was standing on the sidewalk, looking small and lost, clutching her handbag to her chest. Tiffany was standing next to her, but she wasn't comforting her mother. She was screaming at her. I could see Tiffany's arms flailing, her face twisted in rage, blaming Beatrice for the loss of the money, the house, and the status. They were devouring each other. It was the natural end of their parasitic relationship. Without a host to feed on, they had nothing left but their own bitterness. Liam reached over and took my hand. Are you okay? He asked. I watched them shrink in the mirror until they were just specks of gray against the gray concrete. Then we turned a corner, and they were gone. I am better than okay, I said. I am done. The drive back to the estate was silent, but it was a peaceful silence. When we pulled up to the gate, I looked at the house. For the first time, it didn't look like a fortress I had to defend. It looked like a home. The guest cottage was dark. The eviction notice was taped to the door, flapping in the wind. In 48 hours, it would be empty. I would have the locks changed again. Maybe I would turn it into an art studio. Maybe I would tear it down and plant a garden. It didn't matter. It was mine to decide. We walked inside the main house. The air was still and warm. The scent of Tiffany's perfume was gone, replaced by the smell of the birch logs Liam kept by the fire. I went straight to the nursery. Alara was awake. She was lying in her crib, kicking her legs, staring up at the mobile of stars and moons that Liam had hung for her. She made a soft cooing sound when she saw me. I reached down and picked her up. She was warm and solid in my arms. She smelled like milk and baby powder, the best smell in the world. I held her close, burying my face in her soft hair. She would never know Beatrice. She would never be called a blob. She would never be compared to her cousins and found wanting. She would never have to buy her way into someone's heart. Hi there, I whispered to her. She gripped my finger with her tiny hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. I have a promise for you, I said softly, rocking her back and forth. You will never have to wonder if you are enough. You will never have to fight for your seat at the table. I cleared the room for you. Alara. I walked over to the window. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the frozen lake. The world outside was cold, but in here, we were safe. "I will protect you from the people who do not deserve you," I told her. "That is my job. That is my legacy. Not the money, not the house. This, just this." I heard Liam locking the front door downstairs. The heavy thud click of the deadbolt echoed through the house. It was the sound of a chapter ending. It was the sound of a vault closing, keeping the treasures inside and the monsters outside. I kissed Alara's forehead. "We are safe now," I said. "We are the real family." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, taking the last of the day's light with it, I knew it was true. The war was over. We had won. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and boundaries. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment below with your country or city. Let's see how far our community reaches. If you enjoyed seeing Jocelyn stand up for herself and her daughter, please subscribe to the Blue Payback channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who might need the courage to handle their own toxic family situations. Stay strong.